Or the one story that I like to tell, my uncle had a 26 Model T Ford Coupe, 28. And I'm 8 years old, and he takes me over that bridge. And when we got to the 360, he's on the wrong side of the road, all the way down. And when we get downtown, I said, Carl, why did you drive on the wrong side of the road? He said, Billy, we never have brakes. He was rubbing the left front wheel on this rub rail all the way down, and nobody was coming up, you know.
But you didn't have any brakes.
No. You know, crazy things that you remember just come to my mind. There was one famous restaurant we went to called Ting King Lou's, second floor. And you went into your booth, and it had all rope hanging down with balls on it so that you kind of hide who you were. But I never ate food like that in my life. Great cooks, you know, great chefs. And even the old Swiss guy one night, he put on a great big dinner for us, because the French guys went out and shot 7 rabbits. And his wife kind of had a crush on me, and I knew if I touched her, he'd kill me. But he liked to drink. So he comes with this great big platter full of like fried rabbit. Oh, and he puts it on the table, he's half in the bag, and he's got a bottle with him, and he pours it all over, and he lights a match to it, and it flames up. Unknown to him, some had run on the floor, and the floor caught fire. So back in those days, between the buildings, right off the sidewalk, there was about a 1-foot gap, and it was full of buckets of water. So we ran out the fire out.
Tell me about the Bataan Death March.
Well, I don't know too much about it other than it was the Japanese taking all our military, no matter what they were, during the Philippine thing. And they marched 120 miles and only half of them made it. And if you even look sick, a Japanese guy would cut your head off, you know.
Was that during the Korean War?
No.
No?
That was with General MacArthur and his gang, back when he was starting to put it together. But it was when I got out, people would often say to me, why didn't the Marines take more prisoners of war? And I said, well, have you ever heard of the Bataan Death March? Because, you know, the Japanese logic, fight to the death. And my God, that goes back thousands of years, you know. I just finished a book on that whole thing, and I just couldn't believe how far back that had been established, you know, from a political standpoint to start with. And China was the same way, you know. Jeez. Well, this is typical Marine Corps talk, you know. We're going to civilization where there's booze, food, and women. And normally, Tin Sin before the war was a city of about 800,000. When we got there, there was 1 million people in town, because you can't imagine how many people who tried to evacuate to avoid the war, Chinese people now, were on their way back home again. 24 hours a day, the streets were full of people. And our big mode of transportation was what we called a sanlur, or a rickshaw, a bicycle with a seat in the back and the guy pedaling it. So you could get around town, but it took you a long time to go from point A to point B. You know, when you think of a civilization that's as old as China is, and the reputation that it had, both good and bad, I can remember they had little cement or brick buildings in the middle of an intersection, and that was the communist cop, you know, and you had to be careful and all that. And most of it was just a display, because there was nothing they could do for you or with you. Especially, they didn't want to monkey with the Marines. They didn't want any part of that. Well, think about this. Most of us had been away from the United States at a minimum of a year or year and a half, and never got to see a woman, let alone, you know, be in a community or a city like that. And there were 7 hotels of ill repute, we'll call them. And we had a number 1 through 7, and on their medical records, if they got a venereal disease, we even got it down. It was they got it in house 2 or house 3. And venereal disease was so bad that we had to take over a room where a guy could prepare himself medically, if, hopefully, before he engaged with this woman, you know. And every floor, I can't remember, it was 5 or 7 floors in each building, had a pretty big room where they paraded all the women on that floor through that room, and you'd pick out the one you want. We all had points, depending on how long you'd been in and where you were and all that. Most of us, if not all of us, had enough points to go home. And if, when you were chosen to go home, they found you had a venereal disease, you had to stay 6 more months. One of my favorite stories is my buddy Shorty and I did a lot of snooping in the city, and we found that the Marine Corps and the Navy had found some pretty good-sized warehouses in the town, and we found 10 brand new Indian Scout motorcycles. They were still in crates, and they still had the Cosmoline on it. And Shorty and I confiscated 2 of them. So we cleaned them all up, and our objective was that we were going to get discharged in Tientsin and then come all the way back down through China and India, you know, the whole 9 yards. And then we had a young new general who called us in, and he says, I hear you guys want to get discharged here. Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? Well, we told him what we... Well, he says, how much money you got? And we got a couple $100 apiece. Oh, good. And he said, do you have a gun? Yeah, we each got a gun. What do you got? 45s. You're enlisted men, you can't have 45s. How much ammunition you got? Oh, probably 50, 60. Oh, that's good. Well, maybe, he says, maybe you get 6 miles out of town before they kill you. So you got 2 choices. You can stay here, or you can get on that ship next week and go home. That was the end of that effort.
What was that?
Oh, in the Philippine Islands was where General MacArthur had all of his big problems, as you probably recall, in history. And the Japanese beat the hell out of the Americans there, as you know. And they marched those guys some 120 miles, and the Japanese didn't have any conscience whatever about marching all of these guys, both Chinese and American. And if you just slacked off a little bit, you were likely to get your head chopped off. It's one of the brutal, brutal ironies of World War II in the South Pacific. You know, you've heard all the things that went on in Europe, but the Bataan Death March was one of the outstanding, terrible, terrible things that happened. After I got back from my surgery, Bob Hope put on a show for us. And he had been to the island where I was operated on 2 weeks before that. And so 5 little airplanes, single-engine airplanes came in, and we'd cleared off about 3 acres for a ball field and a road adjacent to it where the airplanes could land. And we built a stage there for him. Here he comes, Bob Hope, Jerry Colonna, Francis Langford, a good-looking chick and a guitar player. And boy, did they put on a show for us. In fact, a friend of mine just pulled up a picture of that not long ago. And none of us forgot it. You know, Bob Hope was Bob Hope. And 5 years before he died, somebody was interviewing him and said, geez, Bob, you know, you had so many experiences. What was the best one you had? He says, oh, Pavuvu. What's Pavuvu? Oh, it's an island in the South Pacific. Well, why did it mean so much to you? Because he says, 2 weeks after I put on that show, half of the Marines in the 1st Marine Division died at Peloton. He never forgot it, you know.
Yeah.
I had the good fortune in my life to shake hands with Eunice Shriver, the beautiful lady that started Special Olympics. And, you know, when I think about the effort that that woman made to make Special Olympics what it is today, is beyond most people's comprehension. Like last Sunday, I attended the Special Olympics softball tournament in Woodbury for all the young people in St. Paul. And you wouldn't believe the number of people that are involved in that and the number of volunteers to make it great and to be part of nothing but a joyous, joyous occasion. And that's just a small part of my life. Yet at the same time, when I think back to what I thought I contributed to make that all happen, it's been one of the lifetimes that most people can't even conceive. Jeff was born a normal child. The second morning, they found what was called bile, a blue liquid on his pillow. And I don't know how this doctor ever came by it, but he says, "We think your son's intestines are braided." So as a one-day-old infant, he laid on the table for 9 hours while they removed his total large and small intestine and found it. Put it back the way it should be, but he was in an incubator for 21 days, and then I steamed him for 7 months. And when we knew Jeff had some problems. You know, it kind of knocks you down. A lifelong experience that I don't regret in any way, shape, or form being part of, because, you know, life is what you make it. And my son Jeff is one of these guys. He's 66 years old. He never gets sick. Never gets sick. He can't read, write, or count. But get the hell out of his way, because he's got a memory on him like a trap. You take him someplace in a car and he never forgets how to get there. Calls me just about every day. So it's been an incredible part of my life.
Mention that.
My tricycle is something that was brought on by the fact that I fell a couple of times with my regular bicycle. And when you're 94 or 95 years old, falling on a bicycle is not any fun, believe me, regardless if it's a major or minor. And at that point, my son said, "Say, Dad, let's take a look at trikes." And I keep telling him, trikes are just for old people. Until I got one. And we've got it set up. It will go 20 miles an hour, but not with me on it. So we got it all set up. It won't exceed 10 miles an hour. And when I tell you about it, opened a whole new world for me. I've been in and around White Bear here most of my life. And I've gone up and down streets that I never even knew existed, because when you drive a car, it's a whole different ballgame than when you're going 10 miles an hour on a trike. And anytime the weather's good, I'm out, you know. And in addition to that, my son talked me into buying a helmet that's got flashing lights on it. My daughter Kathy gave me a headlight that blinks and a tail light that blinks. And then I got a flag on the back, because I don't want anybody to ever say they didn't see me. And so far it worked. So in that respect, you just can't imagine what it's like jumping on my trike. And my favorite ride it's about a 8 mile ride. I go around Bald Eagle Lake. And it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world to me. So I get out in the desert, and Friday morning there's 2 sailors in their white uniforms hitchhiking. So down the road we go. Just before we got to Cheyenne, I had some motor troubles, and guy was fixing it. We went and had a little bite to eat. When we got down the road, we found out the mechanics had stolen all my gas coupons. And so when we got to Cheyenne and we got done crying and hugging with his mother, and I told her my flight, and she says, "Boy, are you in luck. I'm in charge of the ration board." And when I left there, I had enough gas stamps I could have gone to New York City.
During that time that you were gone for 2 years, was there any correspondence with home? Did you get letters?
Oh, all the time. My mother and I and my sister, once in a while my brother, had a couple of girlfriends, you know. And you know, the miracle is that you got it.
Yeah.
How the heck did they get that letter?
How'd they get it to you?
And usually it'd be, from 3 weeks to 2 months before you got it.
Really?
Depending on where you were, you know. When I got ready to go back, I went to the St. Paul depot, and the depot agent said, "That train left an hour ago." But he said, "There's a mail train that's going to be leaving. If you run, you can catch it." So sure enough, I ran down there, and believe me, it had just started moving, and the guys on the train saw my plight with my bag on my back and helped me get on the train. So I got to Seattle or Spokane, 12 to 24 hours before the rest of the guys got there, on the mail train. But all it was one coach. The rest was all mail, you know. Then we had just for instance, we had a case, I don't know if you've ever heard of elephantiasis, but 2 guys died in the division, and before we knew what was happening, they flew a serum to us from Guadalcanal. And I don't know how many guys I gave a shot to that day. It was the whole division in one day got a shot for that, and it worked. And I can always remember after you'd give them the shot, the guys would grab their shoulder, you know, and I thought, boy, what a show they put on until they gave me a shot. You know, that's how crazy things were back then. And one of the things that nobody ever thinks about, have you ever heard of Adabrin? Adabrin is a pill that you take to prevent getting malaria. Every day at noon, when you went through the mess hall, there was a Navy corpsman standing there throwing a pill down your throat.